Hey guys, Scott here again for a new video. Today we're going to be talking about Irish Stout and some other assorted things involved with the style. I just want to thank everyone for some of the feedback. I have a lot of fun doing this. Those of you who don't know me very well, I'll just give my quick little blurb that I haven't done in a few videos because I did get some people inquiring where my interest came from. I've been a home brewer for roughly 25 years on and off, depending on how you want to count. A few years ago, got into learning about the Cicerone program, started studying crazy. If you were in my house, you'd see a million books. Took the written test last year, got a 94 on it. I was really happy with it. And as I've said in prior videos, I haven't taken the tasting portion yet, which is style discrimination as well as off-flavor testing for two reasons. One, Cicerone last year didn't have a date that worked with my schedule. You have to be there in person. And then I ran into some obstacles and I haven't been able to take it. If I had to take it today, I feel pretty confident I'd be able to pass. But I'm still honing in on some things. I got some of my flavor spikes. Look at the date. So if everything goes well, I'm hoping that maybe I'll be able to do it in the spring. We'll see. So again, thanks for the support. So what we're going to be doing today is talking about Irish Stout. It's one of my There are several styles of beer that I really enjoy the history of, and Irish Stout is one of them. And believe it or not, American Lager is another one. That may be my next video. So most of you have seen this, right? Guinness Stout, Draught Stout is probably the quintessential style or brand of beer for Irish Stout when we're discussing it. But to talk about Irish Stout, like most darker English style beers, you have to talk about English porter to begin with, because everything started from porter. Now, English porter, which was started in the early 1700s, it was more of a brown beer than we know porter these days to be, like more black and dark. I mean, it was brewed with brown malt. A lot of the technology that we have now, or even 100 years ago, wasn't around in the 1700s. So they brewed it with brown malt, and the kilning and the malting process was a lot different. And especially the kilning process, because they were doing it under open fire, which was making a lot of smoky malt. Sometimes we would be burning the malt. If you're familiar with Rock beer, which I may do that one day if I can get a bottle here in the house, it's like a German smoked beer. So they were using brown malt, and what they didn't realize, besides it, giving more of a smoky flavor, they weren't utilizing a lot of the sugars you can draw off when you do the mash. Now remember, the mash is when we take the barley quickly, just the barley we put with a lot of hot water and it produces the syrup. That's a very simplified version or explanation of it. So they were brewing this beer, and they were also what they were doing is they're putting in wooden vats and barrels. And so what porter that you would get today, even English porter or American porter, would taste drastically different than back in the 17 and 1800s. It would be more smoky. They were putting in the barrels, so it was probably getting a lactobacillus was probably getting it. So it was, and Acetobacter, Brettanomyces. These are all organisms that produce maybe like an acidic, tart, horse blanket type of taste. So a very, we'll just say, rough around the edges type of porter. Well, later in the 1700s, they invented the hydrometer, which measures the amount of solutes in the beer. We use it in home brewing, and any brewer uses it to gauge the alcoholic strength. And they were realizing it wasn't very efficient using brown malt. So early 1800s, I should say, they actually realized when they used a pale malt that they were utilizing a lot more of the sugars from it. So they were being more cost effective. 1817 was Daniel Wheeler, was a guy who invented the kilning drum or the roasting drum, and he was producing dark malts now. Black patent malt was being one of them. So then what they were able to do is take a pale malt, throw in a little bit of if you want to say concentrated roasted malt like black patent, make the beer dark and give the flavor and the roastiness and the coffee, and we're going to get into that flavor here and espresso-ness of the beer. So the breweries were able to be more profitable by using the pale malt and using a little bit of this black patent malt, thanks to Daniel Wheeler. Okay, so just a little history on that. But like I said, English porter was it didn't taste the way it is now. So what happened was Guinness, believe it or not, our good old fans Guinness, Guinness Stout very well, he actually brewed at St. James Gate Brewery porter initially before he got into stout. Well, as time was going on, pale ales were taken over in England and things like that. Well, they started brewing stronger beers. And so what really came about was the fact that when they were taking the porter beer again and making it stronger with more alcoholic strength, probably for shipping purposes, similar to the India Pale Ale story I gave you, they would call it a stout porter. Okay, so the term stout porter was first. And they were not just using it for porter. They would have stout pale ale, a stout, whatever beer, just signifying that it was a stronger style of beer, probably traveled a lot better. Porter eventually started dying out. It got revitalized with the American craft brew industry in the late 1970s. So again, just a little history on how porter went to stout, and then stout, of course, became a style of its own. In the late 1960s, a mathematician that actually worked for Guinness, because there's something very unique about this beer, is it's nitrogenated, which I'll get to in a second. But this mathematician, Michael Ash, developed the technique of nitrogenating beer. And the thing with nitrogenating beer, which when I open this, and most of you are familiar with it, is nitrogen will produce a very tight bubble. Nitrogen is not very good for aromatics, for hops. So if you have why people want to nitrogenate IPAs, which have a lot of hop aroma and stuff, I don't know why. But he put nitrogen in the beer, and they found that it was able to mimic a lot of their cask conditioned ales that uses a sparkler and a beer engine and produce that creamy, thick head that we're going to see with nitrogen. So they had developed that in about the late, about 20 years later, in the late 80s, 1980s, they developed the widget, which this can, if you've ever had this, Murphy's does it too, I believe. They have a widget. Actually, it's probably patented, so maybe Murphy's doesn't have a widget, but they nitrogenate their beer. So most of the stout styles now nitrogenate. There's a widget in there. It looks kind of like a flattened ping pong ball with a hole in it. And I'm going to open it up in a second here. But what they do is there's nitrogen in there. When we open up the can and you hear that rush of air, we're changing the pressure. The pressure in the widget in the beer is higher than atmospheric pressure. So the nitrogen flushes right into the beer and produces that cascading. Now I'm going to do it for you on camera here in a little bit. But what's happening and why you see that cascading, because I think most of you, even if you haven't had maybe a Guinness beer before, you've seen it happen, or you've seen it even with a tapping system. The nitrogen will go up through the center of the glass, at least how I've learned it through a few master cicerones and some readings I've done even through Guinness website. And it carries the water molecules up to the center of the glass, and then it gets to the top, and it kind of goes across the level of the gas and then drops back down. And you see that cascading fashion. So it's the nitrogen with pressure changes that's creating that cascading effect that you get, okay? So I know it's a little long-winded there, but I really feel if I'm gonna talk about this style, we gotta talk about nitrogen and this widget. If you're in a bar, they usually have a mix, 75, 25, nitrogen to carbon dioxide, or they can tweak it depending on your brewery. So nitrogen adds that thick, dense, creamy head. Like I said, it's not very good for highly hopped beers, which Guinness is not one of them. But it does create that thick layer of foam. Now, and that head that you see, that classic head that's on there. So what I want to do here is I am going to pour the beer, and maybe we'll sip it while we're going along as I describe more about it. One thing about this beer and stouts, and many stouts in general, especially Irish stout, is most people see it. And yes, you're going to have that thick head that I just explained. It's going to feel creamy in your mouth, but believe it or not, it's a very light beer. We use that term again, crushable, and I steal that term from a lot of quaffable, from other guys that I watch on. I've kind of adapted it for beers that you can kind of drink in volume, responsibly, of course. But it's a more lighter bodied beer than you would think. Okay, so next time you taste it, put it in your mouth, feel it. It's very loose. I mean, it's only about, Guinness is about 4.2% alcohol. The style ranges anywhere from about 3.8 to 5% alcohol. So it's not a very heavy, alcohol-rich, dense beer like some of your, it's almost like a competition. I do a video about this with people that drink IPA or other beers. It's like, oh, it's 9.1. Oh, mine's 9.2%. It doesn't have a lot of body to it. How it's brewed is it does use the pale malt. It uses some roasted barley, which is usually a classic grain. One of these days I may have some pictures of the grains. It uses sometimes in certain stouts chocolate malt. I think Guinness, I don't even think they use chocolate malt. I believe it's just some roasted barley. They use some even, I think, flake barley I think they use, which is just different processing of it. So let's just pour this beer here, okay? And so here it is in the can. Now what you want to use, by the way, is the classic glass style is a tulip pint glass. Now this is kind of a smaller version of the tulip pint, another one I just seem to be getting from my friends over at Murchisfield Brewery. It's a smaller size one. If you Google tulip pint, you'll see it. If you ever see pictures of Guinness Stout, it's served in there because it helps support the dense foam. You know, I don't love, I love my shaker pints with my name on there, but the shaker pint is okay. For this style, it's not my favorite overall drinking beer. It doesn't add too much to it. If you have a Spegler glass for some, you know, IPA, sometimes that's the next best option for you. A Nonic pint, that's the pint glass that looks a little bit like a shaker pint, but right about 2/3 of the way up, it juts out. And it's short for no nick pint glass because they can stack them without breaking them too much. So something other than, I would use the shaker pint as my last option. You know, and probably not something I would use in a regular tulip, but whatever you like to drink. But again, I give you these recommendations and suggestions, but whatever you like to drink. You want to drink it out of a paper cup, drink it out of a paper cup, that's fine. Or a solo cup, I won't judge you. So again, we talked a little bit about how it's made. We talked about that. And we said there's not that much body to it. So if you're not a Guinness drinker or you're not a stout drinker, try one time. And you'll notice that it's not as heavy as you think. It has some dark, rich flavors. It has the creamy head, but it's not a very filling beer. And it's actually very low alcohol strength. Like I said, I think Guinness is 4.2. So let me just open our can up. You're going to hear it. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Maybe I'll put it closer to me. And you can hear, no, you can't. You hear that rattling. That's the widget that's in there that has the CO2. So I'm going to crack this thing open, and you can hear, well, you may not be able to hear it. I can hear the classic fizzing that's going on from the nitrogen. And we got a little bit of a flow. Now, Guinness, they do make it in bottles. I'm going to just pour this out so you guys can see the effect of the cascading. Now, you may be able to see the cascading here, right? Hopefully. See at the bottom? Okay. So it's a beautiful pour, and you know, and you can see it coming down there. Okay, so that's where you're going to get, and that's again the nitrogen hitting the bottom, going up through the center of the glass, and then bringing the water molecules back down. And you can see it's not really black. Like on camera, it may be a little different, but it's actually more of a dark brown, or even sometimes lighter brown. Like, you know, you can see even hues of orange, you know, red to it. It's not like pitch black. You can also see how that dense, thick head is forming on the beer right now. Okay, and that's going to add to the mouthfeel of the beer. But again, when I immediately smell it, you know, you get that roast, you get a little bit of that subtle coffee, subtle chocolate, you know, a little bit of like a muted coffee type of smell, or I don't want to say smoke, but like almost like a muddled kind of smoky smell to it. With this is not much hops here. They probably use East Kent Goldings or Fuggles, those of you who are home brewers, just to balance a little bit, but it's not a hop-driven beer. It's mainly malt-focused with the smoke, no, not the smoke, the coffee, subtle espresso. you're going to find other stouts out there that will be a lot more bold than this one is going to be. So that's why it's kind of a good intro to it. So, so yeah, you get just very light chocolate, almost like more of a milk chocolate than a, like a dark chocolate. And you get that roast in there from it. And I'm going to just take a sip. Again, you still get that roast, kind of that creamy espresso, not a real rich espresso like you're drinking it out of a demi-tasse type of cup. Not much carbonation. Nitrogen is, they do make, and that's what I was saying before. Guinness, you will see in bottles that they do use carbon dioxide, so it has a little bit more of a carbonic bite that you'll get with the beer. This with nitrogen, with the smaller tight bubbles versus carbon dioxide, you're going to have pretty good creamy mouthfeel. Very easy to drink, like I said. You're not getting any alcoholic warmth with beers. And the alcoholic warmth, that you'll get, almost like you're drinking, gin or vodka straight. I find, and I think many people agree with me that are in the profession that do this on a daily basis, anything over like 7%, you start getting that. You don't get that with this beer. It's very easy, subtle drink to drink with. Some things, like I said, if you were doing food pairing, the classic food pairing for this is oysters. I have friends, I won't put your name on the video here, but you know who you are, that enjoy oysters. And because of the salinity of the oyster and the dryness of this stout, because you do get that dry, again, I always hate saying smokiness. It's not like it's smoked, but because of the roasted malt, you get that roast type of taste. It brings out the sweetness of the oyster. That's the classic pairing. I'm sure with most shellfish, most fare, your shepherd's pie, you think a lot of your English dishes out there that this would go good with. Believe it or not, I enjoy drinking this alone myself, personally, with a lot of the beers. I'd like to just to take in the beer and kind of enjoy the beer itself. Subtle chicken dishes, maybe lightly caramelized chicken, or braised light, beef dishes would be fine. You could even probably use this with dessert, because it isn't really that bold with some of the roast to it. So it's not going to overpower things as much as, say, certain porters that will have. Some American stouts can overpower some dishes. But lightly braised meats, caramelized meats be good. Some people like with some desserts. Now, I feel something like this, if you were going to think of chocolate, if you paired it with like a chocolate cake, it wouldn't be the worst matching. That is sometimes, and again, I'm going to steal another term from one of my favorite master cicerones out there, Pat Fahey. He uses the term matchy-matchy too much. Like sometimes you don't want to mix chocolate cake with a beer that's like chocolate. Maybe you want to contrast it a little bit, okay? Like a creme brulee or a fruit dish, like maybe red raspberries or something. So you have like the beer that kind of has a little bit of the chocolate to it with cream, and then like maybe something with fruit. But again, oysters, light shellfish, lightly braised chicken dishes. You could probably go a little, a little more Maillard reaction to some of your meats that this would match fine with. Okay, so again, just a little history. Guinness Stout, okay, or any stout in general, or Irish Stout, I should say. I shouldn't say any stout too, because there's a lot of different stouts. We got sweet stout, we've got dry stout, we've got American stouts that seem to have more hops to them. Okay, we have ones with nitrogen in there, which a lot of them nitrogenate their beer. So again, try Guinness Stout. I mean, you can find this any store almost 24/7. Definitely around St. Patrick's Day. Other brands to try: Murphy's Stout. I think Beamish may still be out there. Beamish Stout, which are again Irish Stout examples. Again, you will see, and this could be for another video if there was ever interest, but there's Guinness Foreign Extra Stout, there's tropical stouts, there's a lot of different stouts, and you'll see them in bottles, and they're usually the ones in bottles are carbonated, not the nitrogen. But if you never really tried this or poured this yourself at home, grab, they're usually sold in 4-packs. Grab one, pour one out. Do a side by side with a CO2 version versus the nitrogen, and you'll see. Again, nitrogen is great for mouthfeel, creaminess. Very bad for accentuating hops. So again, why? I think it's a little bit of a waste. It's kind of a kitschy little thing that they do at microbreweries now. They nitrogenate the IPAs, and it's fine because it adds the mouthfeel, but I think it takes away why you spent all this money on throwing barrels of hops into a beer, and nitrogen does not do very much for that. Okay, so again, guys, hopefully a little history, a little info on Irish Stout, a pretty common beer that you probably have had before. Hopefully you were nodding your head a lot when I was talking about it, but you can see that a little bit of how porter history kind of rolled into stout, and especially Irish Stout. So Guinness, go try it if you haven't had it. And until the next video, guys, have a great day. Take care.